What is your assessment of where things stand now between the US and Iran?
Well, thanks for having me. Well, firstly, we woke up all to good news that it seems like the imminent risk of a hot war between the U.S. and Iran has de-escalated from both sides, both from Iran and from the United States. That's inevitably good news, but it shouldn't lull us into thinking that this confrontation is in fact over, or this is the extent of the Iranian response to the killing of Soleimani. I think when we assess what Iran might do into the future, we need to take a look at what their long-term interests are and their need to respond while also preserving their long-term goals. Now, what are Iran's long-term goals? This is a country that's been very adept at not deviating from them. The first is that they don't want to threaten any of their regime stability or legitimacy, regime preservation above all else for Iran. Secondly, they want to maintain and further their position as a regional hegemon in the region. And thirdly, they'd like to see the United States out of the region for good. This is a goal that Khamenei has stated in the aftermath of Soleimani's killing and has reiterated. So any Iranian response will have to address these three long-term goals. And ironically, Soleimani's targeted killing by the United States, while it's been a blow to Iran, has presented an opportunities for Iran to further these long-term goals.
Yeah, it's a very, very fine line to walk for Tehran, isn't it? Particularly given that you have a very unpredictable president in the United States. So it seems like there are still risks of miscalculation then on both sides. What is the reality of this aim, the longer-term aim of Tehran to get US troops out of the Middle East? How will they go about trying to achieve that without risking a massive backlash from Washington?
Well, like I said, Iran has been very adept at playing the long game with this. They've signaled, on the one hand, that they are seeking to de-escalate because President Trump has proven to be a person who is both unpredictable and willing to strike hard in ways that previous administrations have not against Iran. At the same time, they realize that this action of killing Soleimani has played right into their hands. We talked about one of the long-term goals of Iran is seeing a U.S. withdrawal from the region and a reduction in U.S. influence in the region. And we're seeing that already play out, for example, in Iraq. And Iran had to do very little in order to have that be provoked. We had, before Soleimani's targeted killing, massive protests in Iraq protesting Iranian interference and influence. And now we've seen most of those protests abated or distracted by the United States' action in killing Soleimani. The Iraqi parliament has voted to request U.S. withdrawal from Iraq. So these are things that Iran is seeking to capitalize on, that the U.S. has played into their hands, while also not provoking any further action that could provoke the United States into further retaliatory strikes against Iran.
And Lydia, we just have some news crossing the Bloomberg here. This is Kyoto News in Japan, saying that the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is praising President Trump's restrained response to Iran. It seems like the killing of Soleimani seems to be enough for Iran to back down from a war. Do you think then that this is a victory for President Trump, that perhaps his big gamble is paying off?
I take a different tack to that. I mean, certainly we should be relieved that there hasn't been further immediate escalation in military or violent confrontation between the two countries. But like I said, this is not the end of it. We should be seeing what happens in the weeks and the months and the years ahead. The Iranian strike against the Iraqi military base where U.S. forces are stationed will certainly not be the end of the Iranian response to that. If we say that this is a success for President Trump, well, what has he succeeded in doing? Right now, we have returned to the status quo ante. And in fact, the strike against Soleimani has prevented some opportunities for Iran to further their goals. Like the old saying goes, don't let a good crisis go to waste. And certainly Iran will not do that. Now Iran has the opportunity to wriggle out of further restrictions of the nuclear agreement, and has already indicated that it'll do so. It will seek to exploit the tensions within Iraq. It'll seek to exploit regional tensions between the United States and its allies in terms of how it it is functioning in the region. And then also keep in mind that Iran controls and vast networks of proxy forces within the region that it could also call upon to respond to U.S. actions. So while we have mitigated a direct confrontation in the immediate term, I don't see at the moment what the long-term upsides to this are.
So, Lydia, just remind us, why don't the two sides get along, at least on a government level?
Well, the confrontation between, or the conflict between Iran and the United States goes very far back, decades in fact. Some point to the 1979 revolution where the Iranian revolutionary forces stormed the U.S. embassy and forced the United States to withdraw. Others go back even further to the CIA-sponsored removal of the democratically elected Prime Minister Mossadegh in Iran. So this confrontation between the governments of the United States and Iran go a long way back. But ultimately, it comes down to influence within the Middle East and geopolitically as well. Both Iran and the United States have traditionally seen themselves as powerful players and regional movers in that area, and their interests are opposed. The Iranian regime has long stated that it seeks to eradicate U.S. presence and influence from the region, and likewise with the United States. Additionally, they have conflict over Israel. Israel is a key U.S. ally and an avowed enemy of the Iranian regime as well. So there's a lot of history of conflict between the two, and we're just starting to see these are only the most immediate effects of that long-term conflict.